Hi guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. Now, I had a request the other day somebody wanted some information on ashwagandha, and I thought it would be a good idea to do a video on adaptogenic herbs in general, because they all seem to have very similar effects, and the effects you see for ashwagandha are very similar to what you would see, for example, for Korean ginseng. So this is going to be a very general video on all adaptogenic herbs, but I'm going to name some of the most common ones that you'll come across. Some of them are readily available in supplements. Some of them tend to be limited more to traditional medicine, but they're all generally quite available, and they're all very interesting because they have this very similar adaptogenic property. So first of all, what are adaptogenic herbs? Well, adaptogenic herbs are kind of a group of herbs that have a very similar effect in animals and humans, and this effect appears to be to actually allow the organism to adapt to periods of high stress. So in this regard, we can also call adaptogenic herbs anti-stress agents. So if you think of adaptogenic herbs as chemicals, as herbs containing chemicals that actually have this ability to allow you to adapt to stressful conditions, which means that they're very interesting in this kind of stressful life that we tend to live in this modern era. They have a lot of uses, and later in the video I'll go over some of the uses that they're particularly well known for. Some of the most common adaptogenic herb that most people would have heard of is Korean ginseng, also called Panax ginseng. But there are a number of others. Another quite common one that's found in supplements is rhodiola, that's also called rose root. And Withania is the traditional name for ashwagandha, which is also readily available in supplements. There are other adaptogenic herbs that have very similar properties. Mimosa is one. There is sour date, which is another. Brahmi is another, and also Siberian ginseng. So these all have very similar properties, and so I'm going to group them together and just call them adaptogenic herbs, and what I'm discussing here is really relevant to them all. So let's think about the anti-stress effects that these compounds have. Korean ginseng is well known for its ability to allow the consumer to adapt to stress, and it's not really fully understood how this mechanism works, but these herbs do contain groups of chemicals that have very similar structures to the steroid hormones that we have in circulating in our blood. Now, these compounds vary slightly between the different adaptogenic herbs, but they tend to either be steroidal saponins, they tend to be terpene saponins, or they tend to be steroidal lactones. But they all have this multiple ring structure, which is very similar to the steroid hormones that we have inside us, and all animals have these common steroidal structures. Now, the structure that is possibly active in rhodiola is slightly different. It's called a rosafin, and that's actually a cinnamyl alcohol glycoside. So it's slightly different, but it does still have this structural similarity to the steroids, and so it may work in the same way. So how do these compounds have this anti-stress effect? Well, the inference is that because they have these compounds in them that are very similar to stress hormones, it may be that they are able to lock onto the same receptor as cortisol. Cortisol has a steroidal ring structure, and it's very possible that in some way, either through the expression of particular genes or through feedback mechanisms, these compounds can actually inhibit the release of the stress hormone cortisol. And what do we find when we give these adaptogenic herbs to animals and humans and expose them to stress? What we tend to find is that, surprise, surprise, these adaptogenic herbs decrease the stress hormone levels circulating in the blood of these animals and humans when they're exposed to stress. So they do lower stress hormone levels. That's known. It's well reported. Many animal studies have looked at this. Many human studies have also looked at this, and really, this is quite conclusive in the literature. So they are anti-stress compounds, and they all seem to have this very similar effect. Which one would you take if you wanted to decrease your stress hormone levels? That's a very difficult question to ask. It's a very difficult question to answer. I think it would depend on which herb you had available to you. Maybe your past experiences with these herbs. I couldn't say that they're all identical and have exactly the same effect, but certainly from the literature, they all have this ability to lower stress hormone levels, particularly in response to periods of high stress. So, what sort of person would want to look at these compounds? Well, most of us are exposed to stress all the time, but the interesting thing about some of these compounds is they've been tested in single doses. Rhodiola has been tested certainly in single doses, and a single dose of rhodiola is able to decrease stress levels in animals and humans when they're exposed to stress. So you don't have to take them for a long period of time to get the effect. A single tablet will actually have that effect. So if you know you're going to go into a period where you're going to be stressed, they could be of use to you. Athletes certainly have been interested in Korean ginseng for a long time. When athletes start to undergo heavy training, and remember, exercise is a form of stress, Korean ginseng has been shown to actually improve exercise tolerance and actually improve the performance of athletes. And the inference here is that you don't have to be an elite athlete to benefit from this anti-stress effect. We all experience stress differently, but we know we're going to go through periods. Sometimes we know that periods of stress are going to be coming up in our lives, and these adaptogenic herbs may be worth considering for that under those conditions. Now, these herbs are also very interesting because they have other effects. They're certainly able to lower cortisol levels, but they also have mood elevating effects. Now, it's not exactly clear how these herbs are able to elevate people's moods, but they've certainly been tested in animals and in some cases in humans in relation to both anxiety and depression, and they appear to have certainly an antidepressant and certainly an anxiolytic effect in animals and humans. It may be that the lowering of the stress hormone levels is actually one of the reasons why they're able to elevate mood, because everybody who's experienced stress knows that your mood is depressed usually when you experience periods of stress. So that could be one of the mechanisms. But they do have other phytochemicals in there. These herbs do contain other phytochemicals. They contain flavonoids, for example. They contain terpenes, and they have other things like phenolic acids in them. And these compounds have been shown to actually interact with receptors in the brain, such as the benzodiazepine receptor, and this can actually have a direct anxiolytic effect, a direct anti-anxiety effect. And the inference is there that they also have this antidepressant effect, and this may be because they're able, for example, to inhibit the monoamine oxidase enzyme system, which elevates levels of monoamines in the brain, one of the monoamines being serotonin. So indirectly as well, they could have this mood elevating effect by raising levels of serotonin. And there are other mechanisms that they may work. These molecular mechanisms are currently under study, and no one really understands them. They're very difficult to study. Obviously, getting into a brain to study what's changing in there is very difficult. So these types of studies take a long time to work through and understand and get the information from the data. But it's ongoing research, and certainly there is evidence that these adaptogenic herbs do actually elevate mood as well. And again, they've been tested both over the long term and as single doses, and single doses do have mood elevating effects. So you don't have to take these herbs for a long period of time before you start to feel the beneficial mood elevating effects. Now, on top of that, so they have anti-stress effects, they have mood elevating effects. On top of that, many of these herbs have actually been looked at from as cognitive enhancers. Rhodiola has been particularly well studied in this regard, and there have been studies done on Korean ginseng and other adaptogenic herbs. and they appear to have this ability to improve your cognition, your ability to remember, your memory, your ability to think through puzzles and particularly tests and exams. There are many studies that have been done on students, for example, during periods of exam stress, and they show that taking these compounds actually improves their performance in exams and tests. So if you're a student and you're coming up to your A levels, your GCSEs, or some other, maybe you're a degree level student and you're coming up to your finals, these types of compounds are going to be particularly interesting to you. They do appear to have obviously this anti-stress effect, and stress is something you feel during exams, but on top of that they also have this ability to improve cognition. Now, this ability to improve cognition has been shown in people who are otherwise healthy. In other words, you don't have to have a cognitive deficit to benefit. Anyone seems to be able to benefit from the cognitive improving effects. And again, it may be that this cognitive improving effect is because of the anti-stress effect. Stress does have a very detrimental effect on your brain. It does have a very detrimental effect on your ability to remember things, to recall things, and to actually think. So it may be that this cognitive effect is actually a byproduct of this ability to decrease the stress. So if I had to sum up this video and talk about the adaptogenic herbs in general, really they're very interesting compounds. They're overlooked by many people. I think they have a place in they're used very widely in traditional medicine, but I don't think they've really permeated that well through into Western society, which is strange because the stress levels that we're under in Western society are very, very high, and these are exactly the sort of compounds that would be useful to a wide range of people, right from when you're you're doing your A levels or your GCSEs all the way up through your life. We're exposed to high levels of stress in different ways. Some of us, into physical activity, and that's a form of stress. We have exams, we have driving tests, we have stress at work, we have stress at home, and all of these conditions really it's really what these adaptogenic herbs are really there. That's their forte. They're there to help people when they're going through periods of stress. One thing I would say is if you're going to decided you're going to self-medicate on say ginseng and or rhodiola because you've got exams coming up, I would take it for a period of time when away from the exams first to see what your reaction to these compounds are. You don't want to go into the exams and then find you have a negative effect from the herbs. So always take these herbs if you're thinking of taking them during a period where there's nothing important going on in your life, just to see how you react to them. And like I say, it's very difficult to actually recommend one herb over the other because even the research is not able to really tell the effects apart. So I think this is something that's going to be subjective. Some people may react better to ginseng. Some other people may react better to, for example, rhodiola. Another thing worth mentioning is that the active compounds in these herbs really needs to be standardized in the herb. So if you're going to look at a supplement, try and find a supplement that contains the active ingredient. So for example, the active compounds tend to be given particular names. They're actually groups of compounds. So in Korean ginseng, for example, the active component are ginsenosides. In Siberian ginseng, they're eleutherocydes. In Withania or ashwagandha, they're withanolides. In sour date, they're jujubicides. These and as I've said, in rhodiola, they're rosofins. So you've got to find, if you're going to take a supplement, you really need to take a supplement that's been standardized for these active ingredients. Now the supplements do vary. It's very difficult to actually understand what they've been standardized for, and some of them are more complex to understand than others. But generally, if you find an extract, make sure it's been standardized in some way to contain the active ingredient. If you're not too sure, find a ginseng supplement and see what it looks like on the back of the ingredients, and it will say Korean ginseng, so many Usually it'll say so many milligrams, maybe 500 milligrams per tablet, and then it'll say standardized for, and then there'll be probably a percentage of ginsenosides. And you'd see the same on the back of Withania, which would be ashwagandha, sometimes also called Indian ginseng, and that would be standardized for withanolides, and there might be a certain percentage. So rhodiola would be standardized for a certain percentage of rosavins, for example, and that's quite important because those standardized, those active ingredients are what likely causes the medicinal effects, and if you don't have those active ingredients in your capsule, or if they're at very low levels, you're going to get less of an effect than if you if you have higher levels. And this is just a way really of manufacturers showing that they've actually tried to create a product that is consistent, because these herbs are from plants. The plants grow in different conditions, and different parts of the plant will, for example, half of the plant might be in the shade, half might be in the sun. So what you tend to find is that when you start looking into herbs and the content they have of different chemicals, is different parts of the plants and different plants in the same field have very different levels of chemicals in them. And if you happen to buy a pot that has been made from a group of plants that has none of this active ingredient in them, you won't get any effect. And obviously standardizing them for a particular percentage of these active ingredients is a way of trying to provide a certain level of consistency in the herbs. So the better products tend to be the products that have contained these standardized extracts. They tend to be a little bit more expensive, but you usually get what you pay for. So that's really adaptogenic herbs. They're very useful anti-stress compounds. They're very useful mood elevating compounds. So if you're experiencing periods of anxiety or depression, also very worth considering. And they're very good cognitive enhancers. So if you've got particular if you've got tests or exams coming up and you want to be able to be on your best game to be able to get through them, then they're also worth considering. And of course, if you're into physical activity, you're an athlete, trains hard, if you've got competition coming up, or if you've got a very intense period of training, they're also very useful for that as well. So I hope you found this interesting. As always, eat well, stay healthy and protect yourself, and I will see you soon for another video. Take care.